The New Mexico territory stretched wide and dry beneath a merciless afternoon Sunday. Dust clung to the air, shifting in small swirls with each gust of wind. Logan Hayes rode across the scrubland on his Morgan gelding, a Winchester 73 nestled in its saddle scabbard. His weathered face had seen too much, both in war and in the harsh years that followed. 5 years since the war ended, 3 years since he'd buried his wife and unborn child beneath a cottonwood near his cabin. 3 years of solitude, broken only by occasional trips to trade for supplies he couldn't produce himself. His reputation preceded him in the territory, the former Army scout who'd turned against his own commanding officer during an Apache raid. The man who'd lost everything because he finally found his conscience. The crack of a Sharp's rifle split the evening silence. Logan dismounted in one fluid motion, the Winchester in his hands, before his boots touched dirt. He worked the lever, chambering a 44-40 round as a second shot echoed across the canyon. Smoke rose beyond the ridge, not the controlled burn of a campfire, but the hungry flames of destruction. He crested the ridge, dropping to a prone position as the scene unfolded below. 3 riders circled a burning wagon, Henrys and Colts glinting in the fading light. A body lay sprawled in the dirt, Apache, from the clothing. Another Apache man fought desperately to control his panicked horse while returning fire with an old Remington revolver. Logan steadied the Winchester against his shoulder, controlling his breathing as he'd been taught in the war. He squeezed the trigger on the exhale. The rifle bucked against him, sending its messenger of lead squarely into the chest of the nearest attacker. The man toppled from his saddle, his Spencer carbine clattering to the ground. The other riders wheeled, spotting Logan on the ridge. He worked the lever, the empty brass arcing through the air as a fresh cartridge slid home. His second shot caught another rider in the shoulder, spinning him from his horse. The third fled, disappearing into the gathering dusk. When Logan approached the wagon, the Apache rider was kneeling beside the body on the ground. An older man, his chest soaked with blood from multiple wounds, stared sightlessly at the darkening sky. The survivor turned, a knife in hand, eyes wild with grief and suspicion. "I'm not with them," Logan said, his voice graveled from disuse, keeping his rifle pointed downward. The man, no more than 30, studied Logan with the intensity of someone who'd learned that trust could be fatal. Blood seeped from a bullet graze across his shoulder. "Why would a white man help Apache?" he asked in careful English. Before Logan could answer, a sound came from behind the burning wagon, small and frightened. The Apache man's eyes widened. He hurried around the flames, moving with purpose despite his injury. Logan followed and saw her, a small girl, perhaps 5 years old, huddled against a rock, clutching a doll made of corn husks. Her dark eyes were huge, with terror in her dust-streaked face. "Nizoni," the man said softly, reaching for her with his uninjured arm. As he moved forward, he staggered, the blood loss taking its toll. Logan caught him before he hit the ground. "My daughter," the man gasped, his breath coming in ragged pulls. "I am Kesta. Those men, bounty hunters, $5 for Apache scalp. 10 for mine." He grimaced in pain. "I married white woman years ago. My wife gone now. Sickness took her last winter. We were going to mission at San Carlos. Safer there." Kesta gripped Logan's arm with surprising strength. "You were soldier. I see it in how you shoot, how you move." "Not anymore," Logan replied. "No time," Kesta said, his voice fading. "Take Najoni to San Carlos mission. Tell Father Bennett, her mother's people. You can tell him yourself when we get there." Kesta's eyes held a truth Logan knew too well. "I prepared her, taught her our ways, the sacred places." He fumbled at his neck, removing a small leather pouch on a cord. "This contains map to our ancestors' treasure. Many have died for it. Captain Reynolds, your army wants it. Kill for it." Logan's blood went cold. Reynolds, his former commanding officer, the man responsible for the massacre that had turned Logan against the army and ultimately cost him his family when Apache warriors retaliated against any white settler they could find. "Reynolds is still hunting you after all this time?" "Gold," Kesta said simply. "Much gold hidden by ancestors. I offered to show him. make peace for better reservation with water. But he want all gold, kill my people anyway. He pressed the pouch into his daughter's small hand. She knows the map, knows the stars that guide the way. I taught her everything. Kesta spoke softly to the girl in Apache. Najoni approached, eyes darting between her father and the stranger. She clutched the leather pouch, tiny knuckles white with tension. Promise me, Kesta whispered, his strength fading. Protect her. Logan felt the weight of those words, another promise to keep in a life already heavy with broken ones. But something in the girl's solemn gaze, older than her years, would not let him turn away. I promise. Relief smoothed the lines of pain on Kesta's face. She is all that remains of my heart. As the sun disappeared behind the western mountains, Kesta's breath stilled forever. The girl Najoni made no sound, but tears tracked silently down her face. The third hunter might return with others. They needed to move. We have to go, Logan said, his voice gentle but firm. Najoni didn't respond, her small hands still clutching her father's cooling fingers. Logan knelt beside her, his shadow falling across the girl and her father. Najoni, we cannot stay. Her dark eyes lifted to his, filled with a grief too profound for her years. She spoke a single word in Apache, then fell silent again. Logan quickly searched the burning wagon, salvaging what he could: a blanket, a water skin, a small bag of cornmeal, and Kesta's Remington revolver with its remaining cartridges. He returned to find Najoni gathering stones, arranging them in a circle around her father's body. Understanding came to Logan. He nodded and set about the grim task of burying Kesta. The ground was hard, but Logan had a folding trench tool in his saddlebag, standard army issue that had served him in both war and peace. Under a blanket of stars, Logan lowered Kesta into the shallow grave. Najoni placed the corn-husk doll on her father's chest, then stepped back. As Logan filled the grave, the girl sang softly a melody that seemed to rise and fall like the wind itself. A death song, taught to her by her father, passed down through generations. When the last stone was placed atop the mound, she fell silent, her grief giving way to exhaustion. This time, when Logan reached for her, she allowed herself to be lifted onto his horse. He mounted behind her, feeling her small body trembling against him. San Carlos is 3 days' ride, he told her, uncertain how much English she understood. We'll stop at my cabin first, get supplies. The night closed around them as they rode west, leaving the grave and the smoldering wagon behind. The girl eventually slumped against him in sleep. Logan rode through the darkness, his thoughts turning to Reynolds. If the captain was still hunting for Apache gold after all these years, he wouldn't stop because of one dead scalp hunter. And if he learned that Logan, the man who had once defied his direct orders, was protecting Kesta's daughter and the map, his vengeance would be terrible. Dawn broke over the eastern mountains as Logan's cabin came into view, a simple structure of logs and stone nestled against a hillside. A corral held a few horses, and a small garden struggled against the arid soil. Najoni stirred as they approached, her body tensing. This is my home, Logan explained. We'll rest, gather supplies. Inside the cabin, Logan kindled a fire in the stone hearth. The single room was sparsely furnished, a bed, a table with 2 chairs, shelves holding the necessities of a solitary life. A trunk at the foot of the bed remained closed, containing memories he rarely disturbed. Najoni stood in the center of the room, still as a young deer sensing danger. The leather pouch containing the map hung around her neck, a burden too heavy for such small shoulders. Logan prepared a simple meal of cornmeal porridge. He placed a bowl before her at the table, but she made no move to eat. You need strength, he said. She stared at the food, then at him, testing his patience or perhaps his intentions. Logan sighed and began eating his own portion. After a moment, hunger overcame caution, and Najoni picked up her spoon. As she ate, Logan studied her more carefully. Though small for her age, she carried herself with the dignity of one much older. Her eyes missed nothing, tracking his every movement. We'll leave for San Carlos tomorrow, he said. Rest today. When she finished eating, she carried her bowl to the wash basin without being asked, a child accustomed to responsibilities beyond her years. Logan gave Najoni the bed, taking his bedroll to the floor near the hearth. As she drifted into exhausted sleep, he cleaned his Winchester methodically, checking the action and sighting down the barrel. If trouble came, he would be ready. As dusk settled, the sound of approaching horses reached Logan's ears. He moved to the window, keeping to the shadows. 3 riders approached through the gathering darkness. One he recognized immediately as the scalp hunter who had escaped the day before. "Hayes," a voice called out. "We know you're in there. We saw the smoke from your chimney." Logan glanced at Najoni, now wide awake and alert. No time to run. "What do you want?" he called back. "You shot 2 of our men yesterday. They were attacking travelers. I evened the odds." A harsh laugh answered him. "Those weren't travelers. They were renegades from the reservation. There's a bounty on Apache scalps, $5 each." "There's no one here but me," Logan lied. "Move on." "That's not what Jinx says. He says you took something that belongs to us." "Last chance to ride away," Logan warned, his voice carrying the quiet certainty of a man who had faced death before and was not afraid to meet it again. The answer came in the form of a rifle shot that splintered the window frame. Logan dropped to the floor, crawling to where Najoni sat frozen on the bed. "Under the bed," he whispered, gesturing to make his meaning clear. She slid to the floor, disappearing into the shadows beneath the iron frame. Logan positioned himself by the window, the Winchester leveled at the darkness outside. When a shadow passed across the glass, he fired. A cry of pain rewarded his accuracy. "You're outnumbered, Hayes," the voice called again. "Then it's almost a fair fight," Logan replied, working the lever to chamber another round. A flurry of shots peppered the cabin walls. Logan waited, conserving ammunition. When the firing paused, he heard movement at the back wall, the weakest point, where the logs had begun to rot near the ground. He moved silently across the cabin, taking position with a clear shot at the vulnerable section. When the wall bulged inward, he fired twice in rapid succession. A scream told him at least one bullet had found its mark. The night stretched on, a deadly game of patience. Logan defended with the precision of a man whose life had been defined by conflict, moving from window to door to weak points in the walls, always one step ahead of the attackers. As dawn approached, a strange quiet settled over the cabin. Had they withdrawn, or were they waiting for him to lower his guard? Logan checked on Najoni, still hidden under the bed. Her eyes gleamed in the darkness, watching him with a trust he hadn't earned. "Stay," he whispered, using the hand signal for remain hidden that he hoped she would understand. Moving cautiously to the window, Logan peered out. The yard appeared empty, the horses gone. But experience had taught him that appearances were often deceiving. He waited another hour as the sky lightened. Still no movement outside. Finally, rifle ready, Logan eased the door open. The yard was empty, except for 2 bodies men he had shot during the night. No sign of the leader or any others. Had they given up or gone for reinforcements? Either way, they needed to leave immediately. Logan gathered supplies quickly, stuffing them into saddlebags. Ammunition, food, water, a medical kit. He pulled the trunk from beneath his bed, opening it for the first time in years. Inside lay a dress his wife's preserved in oilcloth. Beneath it, wrapped in leather, was a smaller garment, one that would have clothed the child they never had. He lifted it out, holding it for a moment before turning to Najoni. "For you," he said. "Warmer than what you're wearing." She emerged from under the bed, approaching cautiously. When he handed her the small buckskin dress, she ran her fingers over the beadwork at the collar, blue and white beads arranged in a pattern of stars. The same pattern, Logan realized, as those depicted on the map in her pouch. "My wife made this," he explained as Najoni changed into the dress. "She learned from Navajo women who traded at the fort." Najoni touched the beads again, understanding in her eyes. "Star map," she said in careful English. "Like father teach me." Logan nodded, surprised by her words. "You speak English well." "Mother teach me," she replied simply. Father, teach Apache ways, both important, he say. As they prepared to leave, Logan felt uneasy. San Carlos mission was the obvious destination, and therefore the first place Reynolds and his men would look. We can't go to San Carlos now, he told Najoni. Too dangerous. They'll be watching the trails. Najoni's dark eyes studied him, weighing his words. Then she nodded, a decision made. She pointed west, toward distant mountains. Sacred place there, safe from bad soldiers. The place on your map? She nodded again. Fathers say, if danger comes, go to ancestors, high place where spirits protect. Logan considered. The obvious choice was to head east, toward settlements and supposed civilization, but Reynolds would have men watching those routes. West meant wilderness, but also the possibility of eluding pursuit. How far? He asked. Najoni studied the morning sky, then pointed to where the sun would set. 3 sleeps that way. Must follow Star Bear at night. Logan recognized the description of the constellation others called Ursa Major. The Apache, like many peoples, used the stars as guides, encoding their knowledge into stories and maps passed down through generations. They left the cabin as the sun cleared the eastern ridges. Logan didn't look back at the place that had been his refuge for 3 years. Like so much in his life, it was now part of a past he could not reclaim. They rode double, Logan keeping to game trails and dry washes where their tracks would be harder to follow. He frequently checked behind them, alert for signs of pursuit. By midday, heat shimmered off the rocks, distorting the distant horizon. Logan found a sheltered overhang where they could rest through the worst of the day's heat. While Najoni slept, he kept watch, the Winchester across his knees. As the sun began its descent, movement on a distant ridge caught Logan's eye. Riders, silhouetted against the sky, at least 6 men, not the scalp hunters, but soldiers, led by a man whose straight-back posture Logan recognized even at a distance, Captain Reynolds. Cold settled in Logan's stomach. Reynolds had wasted no time in taking up the hunt himself. Logan woke Najoni with a gentle hand on her shoulder. We need to move. Now. She was instantly alert, gathering their few possessions without question. As Logan saddled the horse, Najoni pointed to a narrow trail leading up into rocky terrain. That way, harder for horses. The path wound upward through increasing difficult terrain, forcing them to dismount and lead the horse through the narrowest passages. Logan glanced back occasionally, relieved to see no immediate pursuit, but he harbored no illusion that they had lost Reynolds. The captain was too experienced to track her. As dusk deepened into night, they reached a high plateau offering a view of the lands they had traversed. Far below, pinpricks of light marked campfires Reynolds and his men, making no attempt to conceal their presence. A show of confidence or a warning. We'll continue through the night, Logan decided, studying the stars now emerging overhead. Which way, Najoni? She pointed to the north, where the Great Bear constellation was rising. Follow Bear's tail. When it points to Coyote Star, we turn west. Logan nodded, impressed by her knowledge. He had underestimated what Kesta had taught his daughter. They traveled through the night, stopping only when necessary to rest the horse. Najoni rode before Logan in the saddle, occasionally dozing against him, but more often alert, watching the stars or studying the terrain with the attentiveness of someone much older. Dawn found them descending into a narrow canyon, its walls streaked with red ochre and ancient pictographs. Najoni pointed to certain symbols as they passed, naming them in Apache. Father, teach me all signs. She explained. This one mean water nearby. She pointed to another symbol. This one tell about star map. Old ones leave messages for children's children. Logan realized that what he had assumed was simply a map to treasure was actually much more a record of Apache history, sacred sites, and survival knowledge, preserved through generations despite attempts to eradicate their culture. They found water where Najoni predicted a small spring seeping from the canyon wall, forming a pool just large enough for the horse to drink and for them to refill their canteens. As they rested, Logan noticed Najoni studying him with curious intensity. What is it? He asked. Father, say some white men have good hearts, Most have hearts like stone. She touched her own chest. Your heart, not stone. That why you help. The simple observation struck Logan deeply. For years, he had lived with the belief that whatever humanity he once possessed had been burned away by the things he had done and failed to do. I wasn't always this way, he admitted. I did things, followed orders I should have questioned. Najoni nodded, as if this confirmed something she already knew. Father, say same. Say all people can change, like river change course when big rocks fall. They continued through the canyon, emerging into a broader valley as the sun reached its zenith. In the distance, a distinctive mountain rose against the sky shaped, from certain angles, like a warrior lying in state. Sleeping warrior, Najoni said, pointing, sacred place beneath. As they approached the mountain, Logan studied the terrain with a soldier's eye. The valley narrowed toward the base of the mountain, creating a natural choke point. If Reynolds caught up to them there, they would be trapped. His concerns proved prophetic. As dusk approached and they neared the narrowest part of the valley, Logan spotted dust on the horizon behind them. Riders coming, he told Najoni. Many of them. We need to find cover. She pointed to a barely visible track that switchbacked up the mountainside. That way, hard path but lead to high place. Can see enemies coming. They abandoned the main trail, leading the horse up the steep path. The terrain grew increasingly difficult, forcing them to leave the animal tethered in a small meadow with access to grass and water. On foot, they continued climbing as darkness fell. Najoni moved with surprising agility, finding handholds and footholds that Logan, with his larger frame, struggled to utilize. Several times, loose rocks clattered beneath his boots, each sound seeming deafening in the quiet night. Finally, they reached a high ledge overlooking the valley. From this vantage point, Logan could see Reynolds and his men making camp at the valley's entrance, effectively blocking their escape route. They're boxing us in, Logan muttered, more to himself than to Najoni. She tugged at his sleeve, pointing to the mountain's summit, now ghostly in the moonlight. Sacred place near top. Fathers say only Apache, who know old ways, can find entrance. A desperate plan formed in Logan's mind. If they could reach this sacred place first, the source of the gold Reynolds sought, they might negotiate from a position of strength. Show me, he said. Najoni nodded, leading the way along a nearly invisible path that skirted the mountain's shoulder. As they climbed, Logan noticed more pictographs carved into the rock faces, symbols similar to those on the map in Najoni's pouch. What do they mean? He asked. They tell story of talking God, who show first people how to live in harmony, she explained, and how old ones hide sacred objects when Spanish come with crosses and swords. The history lesson was interrupted by voices carrying on the night air. Reynolds had sent men to scout the higher trails. They were closing in. Logan and Najoni pressed on, the path growing steeper and more treacherous. Just as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, they reached what appeared to be a dead end, a sheer rock face with no obvious route forward. Najoni studied the wall carefully, then pointed to a series of hand and footholds barely visible in the growing light. Climb here, entrance above. Logan boosted her up first, then followed, his larger hands and feet making the ascent more difficult. At the top, they found themselves on a narrow ledge before what appeared to be a solid rock wall. Najoni moved to the wall, running her small hands over its surface until she found what she was seeking, a series of nearly imperceptible depressions arranged in a pattern matching symbols on her map. She pressed them in a specific sequence, murmuring words in Apache. With a grating sound, a section of the wall shifted inward, revealing a narrow passage. "Hurry," she whispered. "Bad men coming." They slipped inside, and Najoni showed Logan how to reseal the entrance from within. The passage beyond was pitch dark until Najoni found and lit a torch that had been left in a niche, apparently for this purpose. The flickering light revealed a tunnel leading deeper into the mountain, its walls adorned with more pictographs. The air was cool but not stale, suggesting some form of ventilation. They followed the tunnel as it descended into the heart of the mountain. Eventually, it opened into a large chamber whose walls gleamed with veins of quartz and traces of gold. At the center stood a stone altar, and arranged around the chamber's perimeter were objects that caught the torchlight and threw it back 100-fold: golden masks, ceremonial bowls, figures of animals and warriors, all crafted with extraordinary skill. "The sacred treasures," Logan breathed, understanding at last what had driven Reynolds' obsession. Najoni nodded solemnly. "Not just gold, memory of our people, stories, songs, prayers in each one. If white men take, Apache forget who they are." The profound importance of the site struck Logan with new force. This wasn't simply a cache of valuable metal, it was the physical embodiment of Apache heritage, preserved against all attempts to destroy it. Before he could respond, voices echoed from the tunnel. Reynolds and his men had found the entrance. "Hide," Logan told Najoni, pointing to an alcove partially concealed by a golden shield. She shook her head, her small face set with determination. "No hide, no run. Father say sometimes must stand, even if afraid." Logan felt a surge of admiration for the child's courage, even as he positioned himself between her and the tunnel entrance, the Winchester at the ready. When Reynolds emerged into the chamber, his reaction to the golden artifacts was immediate and visceral, naked greed transforming his features. Behind him, his men stared in wonder at the riches surrounding them. "Well, well, Logan Hayes," Reynolds sneered, recovering his composure, "still interfering in matters that don't concern you." "This concerns all of us," Logan replied, keeping his rifle trained on his former commander. "This place belongs to the Apache. It's their heritage, not something for you to loot." Reynolds laughed. "Heritage? They're a dying race, Hayes. Progress can't be stopped. You know that better than most." His gaze shifted to Najoni, standing small but unbowed beside Logan. "The girl is the last loose end. Hand her over, and perhaps we can come to an arrangement about all this heritage." "No arrangement," Logan said flatly. "You're not touching the girl or the treasures." "Always the idealist," Reynolds sighed, drawing his Colt revolver with practiced speed. "That's what got your wife killed, remember? Your misplaced principles." The taunt struck deep, but Logan held his ground. "My wife died because of men like you, who think they can take whatever they want without consequences." Reynolds gestured to his men, who spread out, weapons drawn. "I'm taking the gold, Hayes, and the girl. The only question is whether you'll be alive to see it." As the standoff escalated, Najoni suddenly stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber as she spoke in Apache. The strange words echoed from the walls, seeming to gain power with each repetition. Reynolds frowned. What is she saying? Logan, equally confused, could only watch as Najoni continued her recitation, her small hands now tracing symbols in the air that matched those on the chamber walls. A low rumbling began, subtle at first but growing in intensity. Dust sifted down from the ceiling as the entire chamber trembled. "What's happening?" one of Reynolds' men cried, his voice tight with fear. Najoni switched to English, her eyes fixed on Reynolds. "Ancestors say you not worthy. Sacred place reject you." The rumbling increased, and now stones were falling from the ceiling. Reynolds' men began backing toward the tunnel entrance, superstitious fear overcoming military discipline. "Hold your positions!" Reynolds shouted, but it was too late. Panic had set in. As the chamber continued to shake, his men fled, abandoning their commander. Reynolds turned his fury on Najoni, raising his revolver. "What have you done, you little witch?" Logan fired, the Winchester's report deafening in the confined space. Reynolds staggered, dropping his weapon as blood blossomed on his shoulder. "Run, Najoni!" Logan shouted, firing again to force Reynolds back toward the tunnel. But instead of fleeing, Najoni grasped Logan's hand, pulling him toward a section of wall that was sliding open, revealing another passage. "This way, emergency path!" They ducked into the new tunnel just as the chamber ceiling began to collapse. Behind them, Reynolds' scream was cut short by the roar of falling rock. The narrow escape tunnel wound upward through the mountain, eventually emerging onto a ledge high above the valley. From this vantage point, they could see Reynolds' remaining men in disarray, fleeing on horseback from what they must have perceived as supernatural vengeance. "What did you do back there?" Logan asked, still trying to process what had happened. Najoni's face was solemn but satisfied. "Father, teach me words that activate ancient defense. Apache engineers build sacred place with, how you say, booby traps? If wrong person enter inner chamber, ceiling collapse." Logan stared at her with new respect. "Your father taught you this? When?" "Many nights around fire," she said. "Stories, songs, secrets. He say knowledge is strongest weapon Apache have left." She touched the leather pouch containing the map. "Everything here, not just where sacred place is, but how to protect it." Looking out over the valley, Logan saw dust rising from the trail below, Reynolds' men continuing their retreat. Without their leader, they would likely return to the fort with tales of Apache witchcraft and cursed gold. "What happens now?" he asked Najoni. She considered the question with the seriousness of one much older. "Father want me go to mother's people, but mother's people not know Apache ways." She looked up at Logan, her dark eyes holding a question. "You know both worlds. You teach me survive in white man's world, I teach you Apache wisdom." The simple proposal contained layers of meaning, a recognition of mutual need, but also of mutual strength. This child, who had lost everything, was offering not just trust, but partnership. Logan knelt to her level, meeting her gaze directly. "I promised your father I'd protect you. I keep my promises." Najoni nodded, satisfied. "Then we family now." Family. A concept Logan had buried alongside his wife and unborn child. Yet here it was again, offered by this remarkable child who had lost everything but still found the courage to build something new. "Yes," he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. "We're family now." As they made their way down the mountain to reclaim their horse, Logan felt as though he were emerging from a long darkness. The path ahead would not be easy. The world remained hostile to those who defied its boundaries of race and belonging. But in finding Najoni, in choosing to protect her, Logan had also found a way back to himself, to the man he had once been before war and loss had hardened him. A year later, at the edge of Navajo territory, a small cabin stood surrounded by fields of corn and beans. Logan worked the land with techniques Najoni had taught him, while she attended the small school he had helped establish with the Navajo elders. Each evening, they would sit together on the porch, Logan teaching her to read English books while she taught him Apache stories and the complex language of the stars. Sometimes they would ride to the sacred mountain, bringing offerings and ensuring the secrets remained safe. The cavalry never returned to search for Reynolds or the gold. The official report listed him as missing during patrol, presumed killed by hostile Apache, while his men, unwilling to admit they had fled in terror, claimed their captain had ordered them to retreat before he made a heroic last stand. The story of the haunted mountain spread among settlers, creating a buffer of fear around the sacred site that protected it more effectively than any weapon could have. "We did good, didn't we?" Najoni asked one evening as they watched the Great Bear rise in the northern sky. "We did," Logan affirmed, resting his hand on her small shoulder. "Your father would be proud." And in that moment, looking at the child who had become his family, Logan knew that some treasures were worth far more than gold.